Hi, everyone. So my name is Shubharsi Guha. I work for Zaha Hadid Architects, and I also have my own company, which is called Concept SG, and I also teach in certain universities. So first, we will talk about architecture in general. Then I will talk to you about what kind of work we do at Zahadi, and I'll try and put them in some categories so it's easier to understand uh, architecture in general. So in general, architecture, the universe is created with, either you have modes of big bangs, which are really high explosions and lot of going on, but mostly the universe is very calm and quiet, like the image in the middle. And on the other side is where, it kind of goes into the black hole and collapses altogether. So with reference to what we know, the architecture in purity is usually an idea that we have created. And why have we created this is because we need room for shelter. And not just us, but also birds. They create their own rooms for shelter in form of nests, and human beings started to do it in the form of caves. But just the shelter wasn't enough. So we started creating different kinds of shelters. On the left, you see different kind of birds, nest type weaving typologies. On the right, you see a lot of building plan typologies. So the aspiration to create new types is kind of inscribed in our DNA from the very beginning of growth. And therefore, we continue to build different designs, different objects. And to do that, we have to obviously respect nature's forces. And some of them are very simple, like gravity. Without gravity, it wouldn't. If we don't respect it, the building would not be stable. Or wind. So if we do very high-rise towers, so we have to take consideration of wind, or the building will start to move. Or sun, like the building can get very uncomfortable if it's too hot or too cold, depending on the region. Fire is another issue that we need to deal with as an architect. And of course, water, because it's a very basic necessity. But I say six elements and there's only five because the last element is the aspiration. And that is what we have imbibed in our DNA. And that's why we continue to build from this picture, which is the Stonehenge, with a lot of pain, to bring put these up vertically, these kind of large objects. But we do that because we are inherently directed towards this aspiration. So, in a summary, the we land up wanting to make the planet richer in its own content, and we provide obviously stability and comfort, and we trigger our own aspirations in general for architecture. So we started to develop these kind of typologies of buildings early on with wood, but that wasn't enough. So we kind of aspired to do them which will last for longer periods of time because these wood shelters will deteriorate with time. So we went on to build more like kind of a translation of these woods into these orders of architecture. So you can see the bark, the column capitals, and so on, and therefore which led to a series of developments in different fields. Some were churches, mosques, icons, modern pyramids, stations, and all different typologies came into being. So to do that, we created some kind of a linear presence of time. So you can look back and look at different eras of developments and so on, how we have progressed. So which led me to believe there's a constant exploration into a new future, which is always unknown. And I went through different offices. So I worked in the office of Charles Correa, then Zahadid, and also myself, to just for this one purpose, to search of a new architecture, and it's always changing. So today I will show you some categories of buildings. The first category, I've put them into booleans, which literally means like what you do in geometry is, let me see if the picture comes. It's basically you take multiple different geometries, you kind of intersect them. And this you can see a lot in art, and art and architecture and sculpture kind of translates into one. The only difference is as you move towards architecture, you have to take into nature's forces into account. And therefore, you see a transition from Piet Mondrian painting, and they were all in the same time, to Rietveld Schroederhaus. So it's a painting towards an architecture that's also part of the painting, but obviously it's spatial quality. Similarly, you see this kind of interpretation of relationship between, Corbusier's work in the Rorschach Chapel. And similarly, at Zahedi, it was inspired initially with, the Russian constructivist movement, which was done by Malevich, and then started to explore. And therefore, the exploration in the painting then started to develop these kind of booleans into this kind of trajectory of motion, and which led to buildings like this, the Vitra fire station, where the paintings were developed time and time again to give that notion of movement, and you get the building on the right. Similarly, there's another building that talks with this idea of booleans, and this is the Museum of Cincinnati. Uh, and this also is a similar language. Then there are other places where these booleans don't interact. They sit exclusively, like the Port Authority of Antwerp office, or they kind of blur together, they merge together to form a seamless boolean. And this is in Ganzhou Opera House that we did in China. So all the booleans kind of join together and form the seamless fluidity of space. The second exploration is lines. And this is quite interesting because one of the greatest inventions by human beings, I think, is the straight line. It doesn't exist in nature. And we created it, and we created all kinds of geometry with it. And this is a project I'm currently doing. We won this project last December in Denmark. So you see, we took the forest, the stadium. It's a stadium project which is in the forest. So we took the forest, the verticality of the forest, and then kind of took those lines and started to design the stadium. So this is the concept of the stadium. And you can see this verticality of the trees and the shape of the trees are mirrored in the stadium. So the canopies come out and the shape of the stadium responds the other way. And therefore, this is the image of the stadium. And this kind of translates verticality. It also translates into the interiors as well. So a similar project like this, which was very famous in the early 2000s, was the Maxi Museum. So these are some of the initial sketches with the lines and how these lines then trying to form and join towards the connected neighborhoods. And from this building that goes up and down and has a different playful interiors. So you have a lot of, cross connections visually while you are moving through the museum. And that's the finished building. There's another one which is now a factory, which is the BMW Leipzig factory. And here the lines were used to connect two different factories, the two gray blocks they were used to connect in this building. And through the connection, it was an idea of mixing people who make cars in the factory and people who work on the desk on the factory, and they could look at each other through different levels. The cars goes on top and the factory people work on the bottom. Here is an example of that. As you can see, the cars are moving on the top, people are having their canteen and the food on the bottom. And that resulted in many things. One, of course, it was an iconic building. Secondly, if you look at BMW's growth model, once the building was finished, the interaction levels were high. BMW became one of the pioneering automobile company in the world, and their growth was very substantial. This is another project I did in Riyadh, the metro station. Here, the lines were used to kind of go outwards so that we can create a bit more space on the top. for the metro stations. So this was the initial concept stage, and this is the construction of the project. And now you can see that the project is built in Riyadh, and this is the interiors. And the interiors then work with booleans, which we have seen before, that they kind of merge into one another to create this fluid space. And here you see the real picture. So the first picture before was a rendering that we create to visualize the building, and then you achieve the final product, and this is a real picture of the building. This will open this year. And these are some construction pictures, how it works on site. And this is a cross section that tells you that there's two layers of metro lines, and then they're subdivided by one layer of transfer. And on the top you see the rendering of the model, and on the bottom is the real picture on the right hand side of the building. So it's quite close to what we imagine. Similarly, here you can see the rendering on the left, and the real picture on the right that's built. Other forms of buildings are like that use lines for, like this bridge pavilion that you see here. Another bridge in Dubai. This was also used by these lines kind of going up and down. So then these lines can also start to become very vertical. So in the form of towers, so we can explore this possibilities through tower logics. This one is in Brisbane. And I'm going to show you one tower a little bit more in detail because it's a different typology. So this is the Milan Tower, and it uses two curves, one for the floor plates to grow and one for the building to kind of twist. And the twist is uneven. And these curves are plotted to give the floor slabs, as you can see. I'll move a little bit faster. I think it's got stuck. Okay, let's see if this works. But okay, sorry, I think the video is not working, but you can see that these floor plates are drawn by these, and then we get some data of the area of every floor and so on. It's all digitally done, and this is the tower. Um, and this is the finished product of the tower. Um, Similarly, there's other towers like this one is in Miami, and we built this recently, and this is kind of sculpting the lines in the tower. So if you have a solid block, you kind of mold it, shape it, and sculpt it. And then you kind of go into the fabrication process. You do some tests of how we will create it. And then the tower is kind of built together with the formwork. So in here, the formwork itself becomes the building. So there is no additional formwork. And these are some of the construction pictures and the built pictures of the tower. A very famous footballer has moved in here called David Beckham. Um, this is another one in Lisa Soho that we did. This was actually a combination of two towers, and you come in, and this is the atrium space where you look up on the left. And because of the metro line going in the middle, we had to build two separate towers. Then we enclosed it as one building. The second last item that I'll talk about is this idea of dunes and petals. So this idea of these formations of dunes, and they have inspired many architects before, like Candela structures, which are very thin, or Utzon, the Sydney Opera House. They're kind of these petal-like structures, and we also explored that region. We did some very early initial metro stations in Austria. And then recently we did one in Sharjah that looks like that. And also this kind of which you see in the Olympic Center in London is the Aquatic Center. That's also a form of that petal-like structure. There's another one called the Serpentine Gallery. So this one is in Hyde Park in London. So you can see it. So that's also kind of this shape of petals, but used in fabric. So there's obviously a tensile element, and we have these columns that bring the light in the gallery. And this is the Sharjah one, which I will show you in a little bit more detail. I think I'll skip the plants, but you can see these kind of undulation petals kind of being under construction on the left and then finally completed last year in Sharjah. This is the BR headquarters. It's a municipality headquarter for Sharjah. And these are some of the images of the panels, how the roof is cladded with flat panels, even though the whole building is curved. It's designed with flat panels. And then on the atrium, on the middle, you can see we leave some concrete blocks, and the right-hand side is the real picture of the opening when we open the building. And this is all our office. I'll go back once more. This is our office. Last year when the building opened, about 300 of us went there, and you can see the building from at the background. This is another shape and form of these columns and these petals I was talking about. And this is the largest airport in Beijing. Um, I'll leave the video to play a little bit so you can see it. And these are the columns that bring light in all the way for all the different levels, the arrival, departure, everyone gets natural light in the airport. And this is the central space. Okay, I'll stop there. As you can see, the natural light comes in all the way and it looks interesting. And there are about 1 billion people who cross this terminal in a year. It's the largest in the world. And it's very compact. So it's a star shape and very compact. So the maximum distance is 8 minutes from the center of the building to any of your flight destinations. So these are some fit. And the last item, as I said, is the exploration of these pleats, which is kind of this kind of origami like kind of folding, bending, and so on. And then this is a museum in Glasgow that uses this pleat technology, and which makes it more stiffer, the roof, and more structurally stable. This is another one I worked on it on Macau. It's finished this year. So these are the rendering pictures. So it's 2 hotel towers and a casino and a water park and cineplex, and there are many functions in this. And this is the real picture of the building now finished. So you can see how the renderings kind of gives us a direction to get closer to reality. Again, this is a rendering of the building, and now you see the real picture of the building on the right as well. So thank you, everyone. I think that's all I prepared for today. So I'm going to stop presenting. and take any questions you have.
Well, thanks very much, Shubhati. There's some amazing images, and that video of the airport there. This class here were all open mouthed. It's quite amazing. I think what we're going to do is, if we can maybe take 3 or 4 questions from each class, and then we'll just go around those classes that are attending, and then we might as well, if there's time, to show you some of the models that some of them have made. Does that sound okay? Right, 5C. Does anyone have a question for Shubhati that they'd like to ask? Arush.
How long did it take to build the airport?
So how long did the airport take to make?
Oh, we won the competition in 14, and it was open in 90. So about 5 years, 6 years, 5, 6 years.
Mia?
The last hotel that we saw, how long did it take?
Which one? The hotel?
The Studio City.
Studio City.
The last hotel.
Yeah, Studio City took, it was started in 2017 November, and it is finishing this year. So you can say about 5 years.
Is that the one where David Beckham has bought a place?
No, that's Miami. That's Miami.
Okay. Eli?
How did you get into that?
Yeah. Did you hear that question? How did you get
No.
into architecture?
How did I get into architecture? It's a good question. I wanted to be a painter, and while I was painting, around the age like you guys are, about 12, 13, I was getting some awards, and I thought that painting was very limited today in a canvas or a object like sculpture and so on, and I wanted to do something bigger, and architecture was one of the ways to do it. So but also it comes with its constraints. As I told you, there's structural constraints and so on. So it's a bit more challenging. So that kind of led me to architecture.
Good question, Eli. Simran?
Who inspired you, or what inspired you to become an architecture?
Were there any particular people that inspired you or influential?
No, I think my inspiration to architecture was not because of architecture. As I said, it was because I liked painting, and architecture was one of the ways to kind of create something. So that led me to that. But once I joined architecture, I looked at many architects, and I worked with a few of them as well. So yes, I learned from many different architects like Corbusier, like either from the books, like Corbusier, or Gehry, or in person like Libeskind or Zaha or Charles Correa and so on.
Right, we'll take one more from this class, and then I think we'll go over to Mr. Peters' class. Gahan? Go on.
What was the most largest building you ever made? Ever built?
The largest, I have designed cities. So we have done master plans for about 154 square kilometers. And that would be the largest designed. But largest building would go up to 20,000 square meters. Like the Macau Studio City is about 200,000 square meters of building area. So it's quite large.
Did you have one more?
Yeah, and what was the most complex building?
Good question.
Building you ever made?
I think all of them are very complex, the ones that I have shown you, because the metro station was very complex. I think every building we do in the office at Saadi is very complex, and there is no one standard formula how to build it. So we always have to find a new way. So the complexity could be either the shape. The complexity could also be financial complexity, that you have to fit within the budget of the building, and you still want to have, so you have to optimize the complexity. So there's different layers of complexity. So I think what is important is to be a little brave and And even though you may not know all the answers, but dive into the complexity and solve it.
Super, thank you. Mr. Peters, do you want to take some questions from your class?
Yeah, perfect. Zainab, nice and loud. Did you get to work with Zaha? I can't say her name. Hadid.
Yes, yes. When I joined the office, I don't know if you remember one of the images of these towers in Brisbane. I worked with her on that one. But obviously now she's not there, so we kind of continue our own work.
Yeah. What was your favourite building that you've worked on?
Usually it's always the next one. So currently I'm working on this stadium. I'm quite excited because I've never done a stadium before, and it's new. But by the time you finish the building, you get less and less excited. One of the complexities of architecture is that, if you're painting, you can do it exactly the way you want it. But when you're an architect, you may design it, but to reach the exact, let's say, precision in the end, sometimes is not possible because there's so many people involved. So, it's something that you learn to accept and then move on to the next. So I think that, yeah.
What stadium is it you're working on?
It's at the Aarhus Stadium that I showed you. It's in Denmark.
Denmark one, yeah, we look. Okay.
Sorry?
What was the cheapest project that you've worked on? What was the smallest budget again? That'd be a hard question.
It's a hard question because budget is related to scale, and scale of the building determines. So if it's a small building, I mean, we have even done till furniture level. So the furniture is the cheapest to build, or jewelry is cheaper to build, and so on. So cheap. So but every project we do, we have to value engineer, which is basically cut the cost down from what we initially think. So it's part of the process to optimize the solution.
Let's do two more. Tabitha. They all have different purposes. I can answer that one. They all have different purposes. So they'll just be given a project, and then it could be hotel. He said the one in Macau had hotel, casino, water park. Others are residential, so lots of different ones. So we'll do two more. Daisy.
Were you upset when Zaha did
That's your personal question. We'll leave that one. George. Okay, so it's talking about size of building. What's the longest? He said longest. Is that what you're interested in? Longest.
The longest building, I don't know. It would be the bridge. The bridges, they could span up to, it's longest, meaning usually it's in terms of span. You can do 40-meter spans without a support, and 30 meters, 20 meters. So it depends on the bridge. Sometimes we have one support bridge with cables. So I think bridges would be the longest thing.
Last one. Noyan. No, personal question. Absolutely not. Sophie, last one.
What was the hardest building?
What was the hardest project?
Oh, generally all of them are hard, but sometimes the toughest projects are, because I would say, are the ones that go on for very long. So as I said, most buildings don't take more than 3 to 5 years, 5 years or more. But sometimes, like the Milan Tower project, we won the competition in 2004 and we finished it in 2019. So it was a very, very long project. So it's very hard to then do that project because the price index has gone up so much. How do you maintain? And it's not because the construction process was long. it's mostly because of there are much other forces like politics and finance and time frame and regulation. So I think it gets hardest when the time is increased. So the Milan Tower would be one of the hardest one.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. That's all from us. Thanks a lot. Really.
I think we might just be getting a little bit tight on time. So, Miss Nan, could we take 2 questions from yours, and then maybe we'll just take a few questions from Countess Way. I'm not sure if they're on the call at all, but then we might need to wrap it up. So there is a question actually in the chat there, Shabati.
So the question is, how many buildings have you built, and what are some tips for a good architect? What sort of test do you run before the building to make sure it is safe? Where do the ideas of the buildings come from? Okay, so I think there are quite a few questions. Okay, I'll take it one by one. How many buildings have I built? Actually, I have not counted. I'm sure it's over 50, but I haven't counted them. Hey, that includes my work in Korea, my personal work at Zardid, and when I was training in the offices. Okay, what are the tips for some good architect? Yes, I think one of the biggest tip is, you should try and express yourself through the building, because if you express yourself, you're committed to it, and then whatever forces come, political, financial, and so on, you will still give your 100% because it's your expression. Then, what is the sort of test do you run before you build a building to make sure it is safe? So we have structural stability, we have fire regulations, we have wind systems, we have then we have to certify, these days, we also have to certify materials based on sustainability requirements. So these are some of the basic safety we need to have. The next question is, where do the ideas of the buildings come from? Oh, this, I think the more you look at things, the more you open up, not just towards buildings, but towards nature, towards other shapes, forms, and so on, your mind will start generating ideas. So I think the mind is very powerful that way. It has these cross connections that it kind of starts producing. But then when you get that opportunity, whatever you have visualized in the past, whatever you have looked at in detail, it could be a leaf or a forest or anything else. So it produces and generates those ideas, and you have to let your mind do that. Not think too much. Just let the expressions come to you. How big is the smallest building you have built? So that is a bit of a difficult question. How big is the smallest? I would think it's the largest. I don't know how to answer that one.
I think it's a trick question designed to trip you up there. Do we have any more? Maybe we can take 2 questions from any other classes, and then I think we'll stop there.
Yep, sure.
We do have one more question from this class, and then we'll.
Yeah.
Marcus, he's actually answered that one already for us. I can tell you afterwards.
So how long have you been architect?
How long have you been working as an architect?
Oh, since 2006 officially, but I started working from 2001. So it's been about 22 years.
That's
A lot of experience, you just said.
Yes.
Okay, so I just thought I'd quickly show you some of some foam board models that some of the children have been working on. So they've just, last year they were working in cardboard, but actually for the first time this year, they've just started working on foam board and styrofoam designs.
Yeah.
And we've been challenging them to think outside the box and make some kind of unique designs. Angus, did you want to come and talk to Shabati about your design? In fact, Kobe, I think this is yours as well, isn't it? Where's Kobe? Is it just no? So actually, this sort of reminds me a little bit of the fire station.
Yeah.
So, well, it was partially based off of the fire station because we took the idea of there being the slanted roof, but also it being a triangle into mind,
Yeah.
and created.
So it also has a triangular roof, and you've got some sort of other triangle features around it as well. So
Yeah.
effective one. They had a slight challenge really to kind of create any curves within the sort of styrofoam and foam board. It's not very forgiving material, but they've done pretty well. We've got one more that I'll just quickly show you. Well done, Angus.
That's very nice.
And then we've got one more. Whose is this one? Is this yours, Ava? So actually, this one here, it's got an interesting sort of, I don't know if that's coming up in the video. Let me just hold that a bit closer. Actually, in the design of there's a cat on the front, but they've got a sloped roof sort of that kind of dips in and out at the top. But yeah, there's some. They've only had actually half an hour to work on these, so they've made pretty quick progress. They're going to carry on with it next week.
That's very good.
Super. Just pop it down over there, Angus. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We've really enjoyed it. There's some really interesting conversation going on, and the images are fantastic. What do we need to say to our visitor, 5C?
Thank you, everyone.
Again. Yeah.
Bye.
Take care. Thank you very much indeed.
Bye.